I have been living alone for a little over 7 months, in a rented house that is on a relatively quiet dead-end street. I've always been a little neurotic with safety, so one of the first things I did was install cameras on the front door and motion sensors on the sides of the house. The neighborhood is quiet, but I've heard some weird stories from the old tenant, especially about strange movements at night. I never paid much attention to this, until one dawn made me rethink everything. It was an ordinary Wednesday. I had gone to sleep around midnight, and was in a deep sleep when the front doorbell rang. I woke up with a jump. I looked on my cell phone, 2:47 in the morning. My first instinct was to think that someone could be in trouble, maybe a neighbor in trouble, so I went straight to my cell phone and opened the door camera app. That's when my stomach turned. A woman was standing right in front of the camera. Standing, completely motionless, looking directly at the lens, as if he knew exactly where it was. I was paralyzed looking at the screen. She didn't nod. I didn't say anything. I was just there, staring. He wore something that looked like a long coat, but wet, as if it had taken rain, although that night the weather was dry. The hair fell a little on the face, which made it difficult to see the eyes clearly, but you could tell that she was aware of the camera. After a time that seemed eternal, I touched the intercom button through the app and asked if I could help. No reaction. She was still there, as if she was expecting something. The minutes passed, and my discomfort turned into anxiety. I thought about calling the police, but at the same time I felt stupid. She wasn't invading anything, just stop. I waited a few more minutes, watching. Around 2:56, she simply left the frame. Quick, as if it had been pulled. I jumped out of bed and went to the side window of the living room to see if I could see where she had gone, but the street was completely empty. No footstep noise, no car. Just the silence and that bizarre feeling that something was very wrong. The next day, still a little shaken, I went to review the images saved by the camera. I tried to pause it several times to see her face better, but it seemed that, in all the captures, the image came out a little blurred, precisely in the face area. I thought it could be a failure of the camera or the reflection of the balcony light, but all the other recordings were clear. I even tested it during the day, and everything seemed normal. That only made everything weirder. I went to the sidewalk to check if there was any footprint, something that proved that someone was really there. But I didn't find anything. No marks on the floor, not even displaced dust. I spent the following days more alert than ever. I even slept with the lights on in the living room for a few nights. The image of that woman just didn't leave my head. I started to create theories in my mind. Maybe it was some person with mental problems, or an unusual robbery attempt, or worse, some unhealthy joke. I asked 2 neighbors if they had seen anything strange that morning, but no one heard or saw anything. One of the older neighbors even said that the doorbell of her house had rung twice the week before, always at dawn, and when she opened, there was no one. I started to avoid leaving home late and obsessively checking the camera before going to sleep. I installed an extra lock on the front door and even put a chair against it, something I've never done before. For almost a week, everything was calm. No alarm, no presence at the door. Until one Friday night, around 2:50 in the morning, the doorbell rang again. The sound woke me up immediately. I took the phone with my hand shaking and opened the camera app. And there she was. The same woman. Same posture, same clothes, same still and empty expression. As if time hadn't passed. But this time, something made me panic even more. She wasn't looking at the camera like last time. She was looking straight at the door. As if he knew I was there on the other side. His body looked tense, slightly tilted forward, as if waiting for me to open it. I stood still, holding my cell phone, not knowing what to do. She stayed there for exactly 9 minutes. Then, he turned his face slowly to the camera, and smiled. A weak, re-stained smile. But that made my stomach freeze. Then, out of nowhere, the image cut for a second, and when it came back, it was gone. I got up slowly, took a baseball bat that I left behind the couch, and went to the door without making a sound. I looked through the peephole, but there was no one left. I opened the door very carefully, and the same silence of the other time filled the street. No passing cars, no sound of footsteps. The only thing I noticed were 3 very light taps on the wood of the door, almost imperceptible, as if someone had touched there with their fingertips before leaving. I closed it again and locked everything. But at that moment, I felt an uncomfortable certainty. She hadn't come by chance. That looked like a pattern, as if he was repeating a ritual. The next day, I took the video to show a friend who works with electronic security. He reviewed frame by frame, and what he said left me in shock. This face has no light reflection at all. It looks artificial, or manipulated. I asked if he thought it could be someone with a mask, but he said it looked more like a flaw of the system itself, as if the camera couldn't capture that face. Since then, I've never seen that woman again. But the doorbell rang twice more times, always at 2:47 in the morning, and every time I look through the camera, I only see the empty balcony. Nowadays I turn off the doorbell every night. It may seem exaggerated, but the idea of hearing that touch again gives me a dread that is difficult to explain. I've already considered moving house, but part of me is afraid that it won't go on. Because whatever that is, you seem to know where I am. I even thought about deleting the videos from the camera, pretending it never happened, but every time I pass through the door at night, I feel a chill in my back. As if someone was standing there, outside, waiting for me to open. Sometimes I wonder if it was all real, or if my head played a trick after so much loneliness and paranoia. But it's hard to deny what I saw. It's even harder to forget that smile. So, if you also heard the doorbell ring at dawn for no reason, don't open the door. And if you can, don't go see through the camera. Because sometimes, just by facing it, you can end up being noticed too. Have you ever had any bizarre experience with your doorbell ringing at dawn? Tell me in the comments. Maybe you're not that alone. My wife and I have always been calm with our routine. We live in a relatively safe neighborhood, in a small but comfortable house. We don't have children, so our nights are usually very quiet. That's exactly why that morning took us by surprise. It was 3:12 in the morning when the doorbell rang. It wasn't just a touch, it was repeated, insistent. I woke up in fright, thinking that someone had been hurt or that it was some emergency. My wife stood on the bed on alert, while I went down with my cell phone in my hand. When I opened the door, there was no one. I stood there for a while, trying to understand what had happened. I looked to the sides, checked the gate, even the street. No car, no shadow. I thought it could have been some teenager playing tricks, so I closed the door and went back to bed. But less than 20 minutes later, our intercom made a strange noise, as if it had received a file. The monitor turned on by itself. It was a video. When I played, my stomach frore. The image was of our bed. We're both sleeping, and the filming seemed to have been made from inside our room. I paused the video at the time, shaking. My wife had already gotten up and came running to me, asking what it was. I showed her the video without saying a word. She turned pale. The strangest thing is that the video had the same frame as who would be right at the foot of our bed. But the bedroom door was never opened, and we sleep with it locked. At that moment, the only thing I could do was run to the room to check everything. Nothing was out of place. The door was still locked inside. No window open. No sign of invasion. We spent the rest of the night awake, looking at the intercom monitor as if it were going to explode at any moment. In the morning, I called the company responsible for the system. The attendant confirmed that the video had been sent at 3:33 a.m., directly to the device's internal system, using a function that, according to him, can only be accessed inside the house itself. That's when the despair hit. Someone had been inside our house that night, and the only proof of that was a video that shouldn't exist. I called a technician on the same day. He disassembled the entire intercom system and confirmed that the video file was recorded in the internal memory, as if it had been made by one of the internal cameras of the house, but we only had cameras outside. And the strangest thing is that the video didn't appear anywhere else, neither on our cell phone, nor in the application history. Only there. The technician suggested that we reset everything and change the passwords, which we did immediately. But that didn't take away the fear that began to haunt us since then. The next night, I installed an extra camera in the hallway, pointed directly at our room. I stayed up until 4 in the morning, monitoring in real time. Nothing happened. No doorbell, no videos, no noise. But the next morning, when I went to review the recording of the new camera, I noticed a 2-second failure in the video at 3:32, exactly the same time as the night before. The image simply disappears and comes back, as if it had been cut. In this interval, the system does not record anything. Just a frozen frame. But what really made me freeze was what I had in this frame. In the frozen frame, you can see something that shouldn't be there. A dark silhouette in the corner of the room, near the door. It wasn't a reflection or a shadow. The form was too solid. I paused and zoomed several times. It was someone standing there, clearly looking in the direction of the bed. And the scariest, the figure seemed to be holding something, like a cell phone. But we were both sleeping. The door was locked. There was no way someone could have entered there without making noise. I didn't react for several minutes, just looking at that frozen image, trying to find some logical explanation. From that day on, our sleep became a constant nightmare. We began to sleep in turns, one always awake while the other rested. We installed extra locks on the doors, covered all the cameras with tape, and even changed the mattress, trying to remove the feeling that we were being watched. But nothing helped. Deep down, the feeling of vulnerability had already settled. And the worst, no external camera recorded any movement during these episodes. It was as if whoever was doing this was already inside the house before everything started. A few nights later, around 3 a.m., the doorbell rang again. This time, she touched only once, dry fast, and stopped. I ran to the door with my cell phone in my hand, but I didn't open it. I waited looking through the Marilha, without seeing anyone. When I checked the intercom, there was a new video. This time it was shorter, but even more disturbing. It showed only my face, sleeping. The camera was too close, as if someone was inches from me, filming from above. My heart almost stopped when I realized that the image was from that same night. The next morning, we made the decision to leave the house. I couldn't do it anymore. We took the essentials and went to my girlfriend's parents' house. While we were packing our bags, I heard a last alert from the intercom. It was another video, but no image, just a muffled audio. Deep down, it was possible to hear a male voice whispering something repeatedly, but it was impossible to understand the words. I just know that that sound caused me an absurd anguish, as if something was about to happen. I deleted the video at the time and turned off the system. To this day, I have no idea who did that, but I'm sure that person was inside my house more than once. After we left the house, we never received any videos again. We changed our address shortly after and avoided as much as possible to comment on what happened. We never went to the police because, honestly, who would believe in videos that disappeared, in alerts that no one else saw? Sometimes, I regret having erased everything, but at the time the fear spoke louder. It was as if, by keeping it on my cell phone, I was allowing it to stay close to us. As if erasing, I could bury the whole thing once and for all. What haunts me to this day is the fact that we have never heard or seen anyone inside the house. How can someone have filmed us sleeping without leaving a trace? Was it someone who had access to the house before us? A former resident? A neighbor? We never had answers. All I know is that, since then, I've never been able to sleep completely peacefully. And if you ever hear your doorbell ring at dawn, think twice before opening the door. It could be someone, or something, who is already in there. Whenever my parents traveled and left me alone at home, I even liked it. Silence, freedom, pizza for breakfast, and video games until late. That night it was no different. They had left to spend the weekend at my grandparents' house, and I kept the house all to myself. Everything seemed quiet. I watched a stupid horror movie, ate crap, and lay down fiddling with my cell phone until almost 2 in the morning. The street was totally silent, only the weak sound of some crickets outside. I remember looking at my cell phone and thinking it was already very late. That's when the doorbell rang. At the time, my heart jumped. The sound was so clear and sudden that I even sat on the bed. Who would ring the bell at 2 in the morning? I stood still for a few seconds trying to hear anything else. No car sound, no step on the balcony, nothing. I opened the camera app that my father installed in front of the house, and there was no one there. No movement. I thought maybe it was a system error or some animal accidentally beating. I tried to ignore it and went back to bed until the doorbell rang again. But this time, he came along with a low voice saying my name. At the time, a chill ran down my back. That didn't make sense. I didn't talk to anyone that day except my parents by message, and not even my friends knew I was alone. The tone of voice was strange, kind of muffled, almost as if the person had his face covered or was talking with something in his mouth. I went to the living room window very carefully, avoiding turning on the lights, and opened a slit in the curtain. That's when I saw a man in a dark hood standing on the sidewalk, looking directly at my house. He didn't move, didn't say anything, he just stood there, completely motionless, with his face hidden in the shade. I was frozen for a while trying to understand if it was someone I knew, some neighbor, but nothing made sense. The whole street was dark, no other house had signs of life. And the strangest thing is that he wasn't near the door, like someone who rings the doorbell normally. He was about 7 meters away, as if he wanted me to see him from there. I closed the curtain quickly, trying to control my breathing, and went back to the room almost without stepping on the floor. I still didn't know if that was a stupid joke or something worse, but one thing was certain. He knew my name, and it froze me inside. I took my cell phone and sent a message to the family group, but no one answered. I also thought about calling the police, but I was afraid it would look like I was exaggerating. The guy was still outside. I went to the doorbell camera through the app and tried to zoom in, but for some reason the image was frozen. It only showed the last moment the doorbell rang. I tried to restart the application, but nothing helped. I began to feel isolated, as if everything was being controlled, so that I couldn't get help. The feeling was that I was being observed not only from the outside, but from all sides. About 15 minutes passed, and the man did not leave the place. It was as if he was expecting something. I tried to record a video with the cell phone from the window, but as soon as I lifted the curtain again, it was no longer there. Disappeared out of nowhere. No car leaving, no sound of footsteps on the wet sidewalk, nothing. I went to check the front door just to make sure it was locked. And it was. But then I realized something else. The lights on the balcony were on. I was sure they were erased before everything happened. That made me crash at the time. I hadn't touched any switch. I ran back to my room and slot the door. I stood there, with my ear glued to the wood, trying to catch any unusual noise. The silence was deafening. I can't say how long I was like this, but at some point I heard a low snap coming from the back of the house, as if someone had stepped on one of the wooden steps of the external corridor. The sound was brief, but enough to make my heart race. I stood there, paralyzed, trying to think of some logical explanation. Maybe it was just the wind, maybe an animal. But none of these options made sense at that time, with everything that had already happened. I decided not to call the police. I know it sounds stupid now, but I just wanted everything to end soon. I threw myself on the bed, with the light on, and I was scrolling through the cell phone feed to try to distract my mind. When I finally napped, it must have been about 4:30 a.m. I woke up with the notification from the doorbell camera app. There was a new recording at 3:54 a.m. I opened the tremendous video. The image showed the man with a hood again, but this time he was closer, almost leaning against the lens, and seemed to be smiling. But that gave me even more goosebumps. The video had no sound. No noise, not even that of the rain that fell weakly that morning. I stared at that video for minutes, trying to understand how it had gotten so close without me noticing any noise. The strangest thing is that he seemed to look straight at the camera, as if he knew I was watching at that very moment. That caused me a malaise difficult to explain. I sent the video to my father, who was traveling, and he said he would come back earlier. Meanwhile, I didn't have the courage to leave the house, not even to go to the backyard. I spent the whole day locked up, with the curtains closed, trying to forget what I had seen. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over yet. The next night, even with the lights all on and a baseball bat next to the bed, the fear didn't pass. I stayed up late, looking at cell phone notifications and checking the cameras every 5 minutes. When the clock struck 2:45, my anxiety began to increase. 10 minutes later, the doorbell rang again. I didn't go to the door. I just opened the camera app, and there he was, the same man with a hood, standing still, motionless like the first time. But now, he wasn't on the sidewalk. It was on the balcony, and he held something in his hand that looked like a key. I can't explain what I felt at that moment. It was as if time had stopped. The image of him there, so close to the door, holding that key, made me freeze. I didn't know if he was going to try to get in, if he was already trying, or if he just wanted to scare me. I took the phone with shaking hands and called the police. I kept whispering to the attendant while watching through the camera. But the moment the car lights approached the street, he simply left the front of the door and disappeared from the camera. No image of him leaving, no movement. It just disappeared. The police made a round, but they didn't find anyone. They also said there were no signs of burglary, although I'm sure the door was unlocked when they arrived. Since that night, I've never been alone in that house. I moved a short time later, and to this day I avoid thinking about what would have happened if I had opened the door that first time. Here's a warning. If the doorbell rings at dawn, think twice before answering. Sometimes, those who are outside don't just want to play. I've always been the type who sleeps with light sleep, especially after I moved to this ground floor house in a neighborhood a little further away. That dawn was especially quiet, no rain, no wind, just the sound of the ceiling fan turning slowly. It was around 2:30 in the morning when I woke up with desperate knocks on the front door. It wasn't the typical doorbell ringing, they were really beats, fast, intense, as if someone was terrified. It took me a few seconds to understand if I was really hearing that or if it was a nightmare, but the beats continued, followed by a female voice shouting something that, at first, I couldn't understand. I got up a little stunned, with my heart already racing. When I got close to the door, I heard more clearly. It was the voice of a girl saying that she needed help, that she was being followed by a man, and that he was still nearby. My instinct told me to open it right away, but something held me back. Her voice sounded very desperate, but at the same time, there was something that bothered me. I looked through the peephole, but I couldn't see anything. The balcony was too dark. Instead of opening it, I called the police directly. While waiting for the line to complete, the beats suddenly stopped. Total silence. I stood there, phone in my hand, heart beating in my neck. On the other side of the line, I quickly explained the situation, and the attendant said that a vehicle was nearby and would come to check. Meanwhile, I went back to the magic eye, trying to see any movement, but the balcony was still empty. I went to the living room window, which gave a partial view of the street, and then I saw a strange thing. There was no one on the sidewalk, but the front gate was leaning. I always locked him up before going to sleep. That left me with a terrible feeling. Something in that story didn't hit. About 8 minutes later, I saw the car's lights coming. The police made a round around the house, and then knocked on my door. I opened it and explained what had happened. They asked me to stay inside the house while they checked the surroundings. When they came back, one of them said a phrase that made me cold. "You weren't the only one who called this week telling this same story. This is happening in other houses in the neighborhood." According to them, it was a tactic used to make someone open the door, usually a woman alone, and then they came in to rob or something worse. At the same time, my head began to spin. If I had opened that door, I can't even imagine what would have happened. The policeman asked me to check if there was any security camera in my house or in neighboring houses that could have recorded something. I only had a doorbell with a video that I recorded in motion, but for some reason, it hadn't picked up anything. That made me even more nervous. The street was wet from the previous night's rain, so they looked for footprints, but they didn't find anything either, as if that girl had appeared out of nowhere and disappeared in the same way. The next morning, I went to talk to some closer neighbors. 2 of them said they also heard noises at dawn in recent days, but they didn't care. One of them even said that he saw a dark van parked near the corner, with the headlights off for several minutes, but when he left to see better, the vehicle had already left. The feeling of insecurity hit everything. From that day on, I never slept with the door only in the simple lock. I bought new locks, installed an external camera, and left a light on every night. Until today, nothing ever happened again, but I also never answer the door at dawn again. If someone knocks on your door in the middle of the night, think twice before opening it. Have you ever been through something similar? Share in the comments. I've always had the habit of checking my smart doorbell alerts before going to sleep, just in case. I live alone in a small house in a relatively quiet neighborhood, so I never thought I would really need to worry about anything. But on Tuesday morning, around 3:15 a.m., I received a strange alert on my cell phone. Movement detected at the front door. When I opened the application, the recording was corrupted. Only a whitish static appeared, as if the lens was covered. I thought it was a system error or something with the connection, and I let it go. The next night, at exactly the same time, I received another alert. This time, I opened the video as soon as it arrived, expecting to see the same problem. And I saw the same static, the same recording time. This started to really bother me, because the motion sensor only activates if there is something passing very close to the lens. I was wondering if it could be a factory failure, but the equipment was new. I had installed it less than 2 months ago. And the strangest thing, during the day it worked perfectly. It was only at night, and always at the same time. On the 3rd morning in a row, when the alert arrived, I didn't open the application. Instead, I got out of bed and went straight to the living room window, which gives a partial view of the entrance to the house. I spied with the lights off, trying to see in the dark. That's when I saw something that freezed me. There was someone squatting right next to the camera, with their back to me. The person wore a dark hoodie, and held something small that emitted a red beam directly to the lens. It looked like a laser, but he didn't move. He stood there, pointing, as if he was waiting for something to happen. I went back behind the wall with my heart racing. I took my cell phone with trembling hands, and immediately called the police. While I was talking, I went to the back of the house, afraid that that person was not alone. In less than 5 minutes, the police arrived. When I went out with them to show the place, the person had already left. No sign of her, but on the wet grass, there was a clear mark of knees. And the strangest thing, the doorbell camera hadn't recorded anything from that night. Again, just static. After that night, I started to leave a light on outside, and an alarm activated inside the house, something I've never done before. Even so, the alerts continued, always at 3:15 in the morning. I began to notice that the time was exact, as if it were something timed. I went after the Doorbell brand center, sent the logs and the images. The answer was vague. They said that the static could be being caused by purposeful interference, some kind of signal blocker. But who would do that? I had no enemies. I didn't alley anything to anyone. It was just an ordinary guy trying to go on with life. A week later, I decided to install a second camera, well hidden, in one of the pots on the balcony. It was not connected to the main system, it only recorded locally. I waited, and it didn't take long for it to work. On one of the following nights, I saw the same squatting figure, this time more clearly. The person had a backpack and seemed to touch something on the floor, near the power box of the house. She stayed there for a couple of minutes, and then disappeared on the side of the wall. The video was clear. You could see that he was wearing gloves and his face was covered. I showed it to the police, but until today they haven't given me any concrete answer. After this video, I started to sleep badly. Every creaking of the house made me get up. I bought new locks, put a motion sensor in the back and a camera in the inner corridor. I started reviewing the videos at dawn, trying to find some pattern, some flaw that I hadn't noticed. The strangest thing is that, every time the doorbell alert rang, the person was missing seconds before the police arrived, as if they knew exactly the response time. That's when I started to wonder if someone was monitoring not only the house, but also my movements. On one of the most recent nights, I woke up a few minutes before 3:15. I sat on the couch with the lights off, and my cell phone in my hand. When the alert arrived, I looked out the window, and this time there was no one. But the red light of the laser was still on, as if floating alone in the air. It didn't last more than 5 seconds before disappearing. When I ran outside with a flashlight, there was no sound, no step, no movement. Just the sound of my own heart beating in my chest, and the certainty that something strange was happening, and still is. Since then, I've never been able to sleep peacefully. Even without new alerts in the last few days, I still have the constant feeling of being watched. Sometimes I think it's paranoia, other times I'm sure that this person, or whatever it is still around, waiting for the right moment. I've already thought about moving, selling the house, disappearing, but I also wonder if that would solve it. What if the problem is not the place? And if the problem is that I have seen too much, questioned too much? What scares me the most is that I could never see the face. Even with all the cameras, angles, and attempts, his face was always covered. But the way he moved, the accuracy of the schedules, the way he avoided being caught, make me believe that it wasn't just an attempted robbery. It was something else. Something calculated. So, if you also have a smart doorbell and receive alerts without explanation, don't ignore it. It may just be a signal error, or there may be someone outside, waiting for you to turn off the light. I live in a somewhat old university complex, with long corridors and several apartments per floor. I've heard strange stories from here since I moved, but I never gave much attention. Until the dawn of a Tuesday. I was studying late, around 3 in the morning, when I began to hear the insistent sound of a doorbell ringing somewhere in the corridor. At first I thought it was someone drunk hitting the wrong apartment. It's common around here. But the sound went from one door to another, always with a short interval, as if the person was walking and ringing all the bells on the floor. I thought it was strange, but I was just watching through the peephole window without opening the door. That's when I saw it. She was a little girl. She must have been about 6 or 7 years old, standing right in front of my apartment. She was wearing a sweater, with her hair stuck to her face, as if she had come from the rain. But that night she was completely dry. She seemed too calm, and he repeated softly, "Can I come in?" That gave me all the goosebumps. Something didn't hit her. The presence, the time, the fact that a child alone is there like that. I didn't answer. I just retreated slowly with my heart racing. I stood still in the middle of the room, in absolute silence, trying to understand what was happening. After a few seconds, I went to the cell phone and called the building's security. I quickly explained the situation, and he said he was going up to check. Meanwhile, the doorbell stopped ringing. I waited a little longer before looking through the peephole again, and the girl was no longer there. But there was also no sound of steps, no elevator noise or anything. The corridor was completely empty. When the security guard finally arrived and took a walk, he found no one. The next day, still disturbed, I commented with 2 closer neighbors. One of them got a strange face and said he had already seen this same girl on his floor, weeks ago, around 3 in the morning too. She rang the doorbell and asked to come in. He thought she was the daughter of some resident and ignored it. But the other neighbor went further. He said he heard the noise in the hallway that night and even looked through the slit of the door, but the girl disappeared out of nowhere, as if she had evaporated. No one knew who it was, and the building had no visit record at that time. The next night I was already off everything, but I couldn't even sleep properly. I had the light of the lamp on and the payphone covered with a ribbon, just in case. But, as if it were a clock, at 3:01 in the morning, the doorbell rang again. Just once. My whole body crashed. I went to the door slowly, took out the tape and looked through the peephole. And nothing. Empty corridor as always. I stayed there for about 5 minutes, motionless, trying to understand if I was going crazy. When I decided to go back to the room, my cell phone vibrated with a notification. Movement detected, main entrance. I opened the recording of the corridor camera, and I got cold. The image was shaky and dark, but you could see a small silhouette standing in front of my door. She wasn't an ordinary girl. The way she moved was strange, rigid, as if it had no weight. When the camera focused better, it simply turned its head to the lens, and the image crashed in static for a few seconds. When she came back, she was no longer there. It was the last time I received an alert from the camera. After that, they stopped working at 3 o'clock in the morning, every day, as if something was blocking. I decided to talk to the building's caretaker. I asked if they had ever recorded any child walking alone through the corridors during the night, but he just shrugged and said that if there was something like that, the cameras would have recorded it. That's when I asked to see the recordings of the internal security system. He accessed the images and started looking at the time of the notifications I received. But exactly at 3 o'clock in the morning, the video always cut. It literally crashed for a few seconds and returned to normal as if nothing had happened. No failure before or after, only at this specific time. After that, I started sleeping with a chair locking the door. It may seem like an exaggeration, but I couldn't get that silhouette standing on the other side out of my head. A friend advised me to install a camera inside the apartment as well, facing the door, in case something happened again. I did that, and that same night, at 3 o'clock sharp, the internal camera crashed for 5 seconds. When he came back, the chair that was propped up on the door was fallen to the floor, as if someone had pushed the door inside. But there was no one there, and I swear I didn't sleep for a second. After that night, I sent a message to some neighbors asking if anyone else had noticed something strange. 2 people on the same floor said they had already heard the doorbell ring at dawn, but that they never opened it. One of them commented that a child knocked on her door around 3 a.m., saying that she was lost and that her parents lived there, but the woman was suspicious and did not open it. Another said she heard light beats and low laughter coming from the corridor. Hearing that made me even more nervous, because it meant that it wasn't just happening to me. I decided to leave my cell phone recording audio during the night, positioned next to the door. When I heard the recording the next day, I almost let the cell phone fall out of my hand. At 3:02 in the morning, a childish voice whispers very close to the door, "Will you let me in today?" It was a short sentence, but clear. And after that, total silence. No steps, no bell. Just this whisper. I spent the rest of the day with that voice in my head, trying to find a rational explanation, but I couldn't. That's when I understood that I wasn't dealing with something normal. After that day, I didn't see the girl anymore, but I kept receiving movement alerts at 3 a.m. The difference is that now, when checking the camera, there was no more static, just the corridor completely empty. As if she knew I was watching. The neighbors also said that the visits suddenly stopped, as if they had never happened. But every time I wake up at dawn and look at the door, I get the feeling that it's still there waiting. I still don't know what that girl was, or if she was really a child. But after that recording and everything I heard from the neighbors, I can only think that it was not a normal request for help. Since then, I don't answer the doorbell after midnight. And if you hear a soft knock on your door at 3 in the morning, don't open it. I don't know if anyone here has ever been through something similar, but to this day I feel uncomfortable just remembering. This happened a little over a year ago, shortly after my divorce. I had just moved to a small house, in a more remote neighborhood, trying to start my life again. It was a quiet place, rented for a value well below normal. At the time, I thought it was luck. Now I have my doubts. The house was simple but enough for me. I didn't know almost anyone in the neighborhood yet, and as I worked in a home office, I barely left home. On an ordinary Tuesday morning, around 3 a.m., I was woken up by an insistent knock on the door. It wasn't light, it was as if the person outside was impatient. At the time, my heart shot. I took my cell phone and went straight to the Doorbell camera app, thinking it was a deception or someone drunk. But what appeared there left me on alert. A man with a large box in his arms, wearing a delivery jacket, standing at my door. The strange thing is that he didn't seem nervous, just fixed. He didn't move much, he just stared at the camera, as if he knew exactly where it was. I waited a few seconds to see if he would leave, but he rang the bell again, this time saying out loud, "Order for Mr. David." My name is not David. It never was. I stood there trying to understand, and he kept repeating the name as if he was sure that was the right address. I took courage, opened the kitchen window very slowly, and shouted that there was no David there. He didn't answer. He just turned his head and looked directly in the direction of my camera. And I swear, it was as if he knew exactly where I was in the house. I went back to the Doorbell app and kept watching. He didn't move much, he just kept the box there in his arms, as if it were part of the staging. That's when I realized that he didn't have any vehicle nearby, and the strangest thing, the uniform looked old, faded. That didn't seem right. After a few minutes without response, he knocked on the door harder, this time pushing lightly, as if testing if it was unlocked. It was at that moment that a real panic came to me, one of those that you feel even in your fingertips. I ran and locked all the locks, including the one in the garage, and went to get a knife from the kitchen, just in case. When I went back to look out the window, he was no longer at the door. But the box had been left on the carpet. And worse, the motion sensor on the side of the house beeped on the cell phone. Someone was walking outside. I ran to the camera app and tried to pull the images, but they got stuck. The side camera showed only static, exactly as it had happened to me before, a few days ago, but I had thought it was a system failure. At the time, I felt a cold in my stomach. I took my cell phone, called the police directly, and asked them to send a car. While talking on the phone, I heard a slight slat coming from the back of the house, as if someone had stepped on dry leaves. I lowered myself behind the counter and waited for any movement. It didn't take long, and I heard the sound of the back door handle being tested. Someone outside turned it slowly, as if I was sure that at some point I would leave the door open. The police attendant asked me to stay on the line, said a car was on its way. But every second seemed like an eternity. I could only think, who is this guy? And what was in that box? The car arrived after about 10 minutes, but it seemed like an hour. When the police knocked on the door and I finally opened it, they swept around the house. The box was still on the floor. One of the policemen asked me not to touch and wore gloves to open. Inside, there was only a piece of paper. It was a torn sheet with a handwritten phone number and a name. The same name of the former resident, the guy who had disappeared months before, as I was told when I rented the house. The police were surprised, but without evidence of invasion, they said there was not much to do. They registered the call and instructed me to keep the doors locked and trigger again if something happened. After they left, I tried to go back to sleep, but no chance. I had all the lights on. The next day, I went straight to the real estate agency to ask about the former resident. The girl was visibly uncomfortable when I said the name. He said that he had disappeared without warning, and that some neighbors had complained about strange movements at the time, but that nothing was proven. She tried to change the subject quickly. That made me even more restless. Whoever that delivery man was, he didn't come to deliver anything. He came after someone. And maybe I didn't know that this person didn't live there anymore. That night, I couldn't relax. I checked all the locks in the house about 5 times. I put a weight leaning against the front door, and even positioned some chairs under the door handles, as I saw in a video on the internet. At 3:07 a.m., I received a notification from the doorbell again. The same movement alert. When I opened the app to see the image, nothing. Black screen. Static. Just like those broken horror movie cameras. And then, for less than a second, the image appeared, a figure standing on the sidewalk, staring at the house. I couldn't see the face, but he was there. I stopped breathing. I felt an icy chill run through the back of my neck. I hid behind the living room curtain and peeked through the slit. The street was empty. No car, no person, nothing. But I know what I saw. The next day, I printed the frozen image of the camera and went to the police station. The policeman analyzed the image and asked me if that was a joke. I said I could barely see something. But for me, that was enough. I don't know who that man was, what he wanted with me, or who he lived here with before. But since that day, I've never answered the door at dawn, not even when I hear insistent knocks and the doorbell ringing nonstop. After that, I had all the locks changed, installed a second lock on the door, and put motion sensors in the back of the house. The smart doorbell was also replaced, but curiously, since that day, I never received alerts at dawn. No strange visits, no figure, no delivery man. It was as if everything had stopped out of nowhere, the same way it started. Still, every night, before going to sleep, I check locks, look through the windows, and leave a light on in the hallway. Not for safety, but because that fixed look from the camera doesn't leave my head to this day. Maybe it was a mess. Maybe someone was really looking for the old resident. Or maybe that visit wasn't a mistake. The name the delivery man said, that of the former resident, echoed in my mind for weeks. But what made me more disturbed was the way he looked at me, as if he knew who I was. Since then, I avoid intercoms and open doors. And if there's one thing I've learned from all this, if someone shows up at your door at dawn, never assume it's just a wrong delivery. If you received a strange order at dawn, would you open the door? That night, I was alone at home, studying for an important college exam. It was around 10 at night when I heard loud knocks on the front door. Do you know when you get a mini scare because you weren't expecting anyone? That was exactly it. I live in a single-story house in a relatively quiet neighborhood with little movement at night, so anything out of the ordinary already leaves us on alert. I got up slowly and went to the door with my cell phone in my hand, without opening it. When I looked through the peephole, I saw a delivery man holding a large paper bag. He looked normal at first glance, with dark clothes and a cap. But I hadn't asked for anything. I spoke to him without opening the door, asking which restaurant the delivery was from. He said any name, but it was a place where I had never bought. I still asked out loud the person's name, and he answered mine, which made me freeze for a second. It was as if someone had used my data. I said I hadn't asked for anything, and that he must have been wrong, but he insisted. He stood there, saying he just wanted to deliver and leave. That's when I started to find everything strange. His posture was too insistent, and his voice was kind of forced. Instead of leaving, he stood still, as if he was waiting for something else to happen. I decided not to open the door at all. Instead, I went to the side window of the living room, which gives a half-side view of the front of the house, to try to see better. I bent down so as not to be seen and pulled the curtain just a little bit. That's when the panic hit. Behind the delivery man's car, squatting on the sidewalk, were two men who were clearly not part of any delivery. One of them wore a hood, and the other seemed to have a large backpack on his back. They were down, hidden, looking in the direction of the door, as if they were waiting for some sign. My heart raced, and I turned off all the lights in the house at the time, almost stumbling on the living room table. I took my cell phone and called the police directly. While I was talking, I went to my room and locked the door, trying to keep my voice down. The attendant asked for calm, said she was going to send a car, and asked me not to make any sudden movement or try to leave. I could only think of how that looked like an ambush. The idea that they were trying to break into my house using the excuse of a delivery shocked me. I stood there, with my ear glued to the door and my heart hammering in my chest, listening to the sound of footsteps outside and the doorbell ringing again, as if the guy wanted to force me to open in insistence. After a few minutes, everything went silent. Neither the bell nor steps, nothing. Just the distant sound of a passing car from time to time. That made me even more nervous, because the absence of sound seemed worse than the previous movement. I stayed there in the room, motionless, with my cell phone in my hand, until I heard the car's siren coming. As soon as I heard the sound of the police, I approached the window again carefully. I saw the headlights illuminating the street, and one of the policemen leaving with the flashlight pointed. When he got closer to the door, I finally got the courage to leave the room and open it, very slowly, announcing that I was the one who was there. I explained everything that had happened and took the police to the side of the house, where I had seen the two men. They used the flashlights, searched the area, but as I feared, the guys had already left. The only thing the police found was an empty food package thrown on the floor near the gate, probably used as part of the disguise. One of the policemen told me that, recently, a gang was using this same method. They sent someone pretending to be a delivery man to lure the victim out, while the others tried to invade the house. Sometimes it was by mistake, sometimes by order. Someone passed the address as a target. Even with the presence of the police, I couldn't sleep that night. After the agents left, I reinforced all the locks, pulled curtains, and stayed on the couch with the living room light on, trying to keep my mind busy watching anything. But any little noise, even the crack of the house with the wind, already left me on alert. I kept thinking about how many times something similar could have happened to other people and no one knew. And the most disturbing thing, what if I had opened the door right away, without suspecting? What would have happened? The next day, I called my parents and asked them to stay with them for a few days. Just leaving that house, I already felt an immense relief. After a few days, I installed more cameras and changed the main door lock. I never saw anyone suspicious there again, but until today, every time someone rings the doorbell by surprise, especially at night, my whole body crashes. The feeling of danger comes back on time, like an instinct that got stuck in me after that night. Since that day, I have developed the habit of checking twice if I really didn't ask for anything before opening any door. It seems like an exaggeration, but only those who have been through such a situation understand the kind of paranoia that remains. It's as if something had changed in the way I see my own house. The place that should be my refuge now carries this uncomfortable memory of a night when everything could have gone wrong. Even with reinforced security, fear still appears when the clock approaches 10 at night. If I hadn't looked out the window, maybe I would never have seen the other two men hidden. Maybe it would have become a statistic. Sometimes, I think someone up there gave me an alert at the right time. So, if I may give you some advice, never open the door without checking. And always trust that instinct that warns you when something is not right. Has something strange happened to you involving deliveries or doorbells during the night? Share in the comments. Your report may alert others.